Now, people will often ask me what it means when you have multiple channels going between the same two centers, right? You have your nine centers on the body graph, and say you have multiple channels connecting the root and the spleen, or the root and the sacral, or the root and the solar plexus. What does this mean? The example I like to give is just looking at the three format channels. And you can kind of see how it plays out if you imagine people who have these format channels. The reason I like to look at the format channels is because, for those who aren't familiar with them, they're the channels between the root and the sacral. The format channels tend to kind of dominate the aura, the energy, the life force of the person, and they can even dominate the feeling of the room. For example, I have the 952, the channel of concentration, combining the focus of gate 9 with the stillness of gate 52. If there are no other format channels present in any person's aura in the room, even if there's a number of people in the room, if I'm the only one that has a format channel there, and it's the 952, I tend to steer the whole room towards shh. I steer everything towards shush. It's like turning the handle of the door carefully so you don't make a sound, or keeping others from talking or looking at their cell phone or not paying attention during class or during a film. It's very much a sit still and focus. It's a shushing, pay attention kind of aura of a library. If the feeling of a library where you go in and if you're too loud, the librarian will shush you. And it's all about concentrating. So what happens when there are other channels present there? So I'll give the example of a friend of mine who has both the 360 and the 4253. That is the other two, the other two channels. And instead of calling them the numbers, I'm just going to call these the logic format, the 952, the individual format channel, the 360, and then for the 4253, that is the abstract format channel. And there's other names for these, like the logic is also known as understanding, and abstract is also called sensing or experiential. But in general, I'll just call them logic, individual, and abstract. So I have the logic one. So what is mine doing? Mine is sitting still and paying attention and focusing. It's like what I do when I do these, readings, or when I do these talks and so on. What he has are the individual and the experiential. Well, what are these like? Okay, the individual one, very simple. The 360, anyone who has the 360, this is the moodiest channel. Look at people that you know who have the 360, or if you have this yourself, you have to admit it. It is so moody. I have seen 360s just wake up on the wrong side of bed, and instead of doing what a melancholic person should do, or what people are supposed to do, I feel a little preachy saying supposed to, but what I just mean from a mechanical perspective, not from a moralistic perspective. But from a mechanical perspective, when you're in a melancholic state, you're quote unquote supposed to spend time alone. It's the individual state. It's the individual, alone in the world. And I've seen people with the 360, instead of that, being so moody but wanting to be included or not wanting to miss out, or, there's any number of reasons why somebody that's in a fit of melancholy would surround themselves with people, and then they're in such a terrible mood. And so the 360, in a word, is moody. It's melancholic. And you'll notice that it's not always melancholic. It's on a pulse. And sometimes it's not melancholic for weeks or months out of the blue. And just as a side note, my standard advice for anyone that has individual circuitry, or just really for anyone, because all of us at some point or the other will experience it, whether through, an electromagnetic or transit and so on, my advice is always the same, which is to just spend time alone and not try to explain it. This is the standard kind of, human design advice, which is that I think it's about finding that way of being creative, and that creative expression does not have to be some kind of sanctioned creative expression. Ra joked that he would wash the dishes when he was melancholy. What I personally like to do when I feel melancholy is go for a walk and maybe look at some insects, or look at the kind of microscopic world, or get in touch with the mineral world, things like that. And then going to the 4253, this is the channel of beginnings, middles, and endings. The channel of experience, the channel of maturation, the channel of growing up. And how we do that is by going through all these different experiences. And it's funny because I never really understood it from reading about it. But as I mentioned, I have a good friend who has both of these, both the abstract and the individual format channels. And I see that certain days he's really moody, or certain times I see him he's moody, so I get to see that. At other times, I see. It's kind of an ever-present, that there's a phase. And I had to smile to myself earlier, because I was trying to think of, just before I started to record this, I thought, what is the perfect way to describe the abstract format channel? What is the perfect way to describe that 4253? What is it really? And also because I have good friends who have that channel, and I was thinking about them, and I was thinking, what is it, this experiential thing? I really think it's like a sitcom. It's like Kramer and Seinfeld, for those of you who've seen Seinfeld, where every episode he has a new thing, and he goes, "Oh, I got these new shower heads, Jerry, and they're the best shower heads," or "I'm not wearing shoes this week, Jerry." That's what it is. It's that every time you see them, they're in a new phase where they're doing their thing. I'm seeing how long I can go without taking a shower, whatever it is, right? If they have their personality sun on the gate of extremes, as the case of my friend. But yeah, so then how do these interfere? Well, okay, so there's a number of ways they interfere with each other, right? So that's part of the question is, what does it mean when you have these multiple channels? So I don't have multiple format channels in my chart. He does have multiple in his. So for him, I would say what it means is that there's a little bit of an interference internally between these two processes. That melancholic individual process wants to go off and be alone. That abstract experiential process wants to be on to the next adventure. And so there's going to be a little interference and a little bit of a stop and go. And there can also be, I guess what might even be called a cross-contamination between the two. There can be, something that spikes and accelerates really quickly into an experience. And then it sustains the experience much longer than it would have otherwise, being totally individual. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can see how, it's actually in Ra's 1999 materials, Channels by Type, where he talks about the health impact of having multiple channels, that kind of compete with each other. Because for instance, my format channel is very dry in constitution, and it's prone to having health issues throughout my life that are like logic. They're repetitions, they're loops, they're patterns. They come and they go, but every time they come back, it's kind of the same thing, and they repeat. Well, somebody who has the 4253 is going to have once in a lifetime issues. Well, if they're around my aura too much, my aura can kind of contaminate that process and make it repeat. Meanwhile, they can make me, say they have an individual format, the 360, they can make me spike much higher or lower than I would otherwise, having kind of an even keel, moderate, pattern-based system. So I guess all I'm going to say is, internally, if you have multiple channels between the two centers, what it really means is that you can kind of observe how both of those needs need to be met, but that how they don't really operate as smoothly as if there was one mode of expression. It's the same as if you have only one channel between two centers and then you have a hanging gate. Then somebody comes along who has the other hanging gate, you can observe that same thing happening. So here's what I really want to kind of say, because people always ask me, what does it mean? And I really want to describe it in such a way that you yourself can observe what it means. So I'll give you an example from my observations. My 952. If I'm in my own aura, I sit, maybe I'm watching TV or maybe I have music, whatever. But say I have a task I want to do, like I want to write something. Well, it doesn't really matter what's going on around me. With my channel of concentration, I'm pretty good at focusing. In that stillness, I can just focus and I can sit there. But say my friend comes along and goes to 360. Well, if he's in a mood, that mood is going to keep interrupting my focus, right? And then what I've noticed is that that mood, we'll talk about it and say, oh yeah, wow, that's really bad, that happened, that's really annoying. But then he'll keep bringing it up, again and again and again. And that's maybe the repetition of my influence of logic on him. It's like my sit still and focus is making him sit still and focus on his melancholy or on his bad mood. So you see how the 360 kind of cross-contaminates with the 952. My 952, all I want to do is just sit there and focus, and I'm typing, and then he's talking to me and trying to distract me and trying to get my attention, in this 360 mood, this bad mood, kind of chip on the shoulder, wrong side of bed. Or at a different time, thinking about the 4253 and just thinking about how it's always, well, today I'm gonna, only eat rice. And I'm gonna do a rice fast for as long, that's the experiential format. It's like it's gonna try something new. It starts to do a new thing and then it does it. Or today's the last day I'm gonna do this. I'm finished with that now. I'm done with that. And it kind of has phases and they have beginnings, middles, and ends. And so it's really interesting to see that, and it's even funny to see how it plays out. I mean, the person I'm talking about who has the other two format channels has been staying at my house during this pandemic. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name. It's Von Paul, the artist. And for those of you unfamiliar with him, you can look on Instagram, just look up username Von Paul Artist or hashtag Von Paul. And in any case, it's been funny because he has the experiential format channel, the abstract, the 4253. So he has the beginning, middle, and end. Well, I have the 952, the one that's all about repetition and cycling and going back around, again and again and again. And so he had this amazing Russian painter shirt, or I call it Russian painter shirt. It's really a Russian sailor shirt, but it looks like a Picasso shirt, a black and white shirt. And he threw it away. And I fished it out of the trash, and I washed it, and put it away, and sometime later he found it. Oh, you kept that? Oh, well, maybe I'll wear it again. So he starts wearing it again. Then he threw it away again, and I did it again, and he threw it away again. And it's because with his experiential abstract circuitry, he's used to getting something new, using it, and then getting rid of it. He has a defined spleen, easy to let go of things, and then things have a beginning, a middle, and end. They have a lifespan. You have a amount of time, and you get tired of something, or it gets worn out, or it gets stains, and you don't want to bother cleaning it or fixing it, or whatever it is. You get rid of it. Well, for me, with my logical format, I'm continually improving things and tinkering with things and fixing them up and so on. And so it's just such a different. I can see how it's like they interfere with each other's processes. It doesn't always have to be bad. I mean, it was more just like he had the experience of his experience not ending when it was going to end. He thought it was over, and it kept coming back from the dead, so to speak, until he finally burned the shirt. No joke, the shirt was actually burned. Months after it would have just been in a landfill had I not fished it out of the trash. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I can see how it's not good or bad. There's no moral judgment. They just interfere. The processes just interfere with each other. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes interference can be a form of working together, inflecting each other, as they say in the astrological world. The archetypes inflect each other. Well, I guess so. I mean, they can also clash, though, because, the abstract format channel is the wet channel, and the logic format channel is the dry channel. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just, you can see how if you have multiple channels in your own chart, well, and then here's another interesting one. Somebody who, say, has all three of the verbal gunslinger channels. Are they going to be a super verbal gunslinger? Not in my experience. In my experience, they'll be very quiet, actually. And oftentimes, the the different verbal gunslinger channels will kind of interfere with each other. You know, the freakish individuality interferes with the collective ability to appear normal, for instance, and the collective ability to be influenced and homogenized and easily conditioned by others, as all collective circuitry is, interferes with the individual circuitry's need to stay empowered. So you can see how there are these conflicts that happen. At the same time, there's no wrong design, right? You can also see how people find ways to make it work. In the example of von Paul, who has both the individual and the abstract, there are going to be conflicting things. As I mentioned, the individual obligation to remain empowered. Don't interfere with me. The collective obligation to share in experiences. And part of sharing in that experience is to be open to others and so on, in the ways that the collective is, at least open to others who are also open to the collective, not necessarily open to tribal bigotry or open to individual mutative freaky genius, but, you know, open to others who act on behalf of the collective. That's kind of how the collective works. So yeah, I mean, it's if you see the 2 or 3 channels between 2 centers, you know, what it really means is that there's going to be some interference, there's going to be some need to synthesize these 2 for that person. There may also be a preferred channel, and the other one may not get used as much. There's a lot of ways it can work, but it's interesting to kind of, you can start looking even just at the circuitry and just ask, you know, what are the 2 channels? If it's a tribal channel, say the 1949, along with a experiential collective channel, like the 4130, then, you know, that 1949 is all about mating and all about support and all about long-term, you know, marriage, possessiveness and jealousy and monogamy. And that 4130 is all about experience and having another experience. It's impersonal. There's no strings attached. You don't have to ever see the person again, you know? And what happens if somebody has both those channels? Well, it can go a lot of ways, right? I mean, on the one hand, they can end up marrying the person they were supposed to spend a weekend with. And that would be the sort of tragic version of it. On the other hand, they can perhaps find ways of integrating those 2 very, very different things. You know, they can be the tribal face of the collective or the collective face of the tribe, and so on. So there are ways of synthesizing this together. What I'm really giving you is the vocabulary, the technique, if you will, to observe, you know, and kind of take note with hopefully what have been some helpful examples of some of the ways that these channels can play out. All right. It's been a pleasure.